Hey guys, Phil Wesson here with another Hitfilm 2 Ultimate tutorial. Today we're going to be playing with the fire effect and applying it to different layers and making some cool stuff using some transparency and things like that. So with that said, let's take a quick look at this video I made a few days ago and then we'll get started. Alright, so the main thing that you have to remember when working with fire is how the fire is generated. If you have a black and white image, it'll usually take, depending on how you set the fire, it'll usually take a certain section of that image and, use that as the generator. So let's do a real quick test just to kind of show what I mean here and just illustrate that. I'm just going to make a real quick composite and make a white plane. And also, I'm assuming that you have some basic knowledge of Hitfilm 2 Ultimate. If not, there's plenty of tutorials that you can find online or on the Hitfilm website. Anyways, with this plane, this white plane, I just used a circular mask or elliptical mask rather to, just make a small white circle. Here in this, this black and then the white circle there. If you take the fire effect and apply it to this layer, what it's going to do first is, and it can actually move up a little bit, you can see it's using that layer as the generator for that. If you go into the controls for fire, you can set the flammable region. Right now it's using the alpha. Usually I tend to use the lightness as well, depending on what I'm doing, of course. One thing that you want to do so you can see what you're doing is go here into Appearance, take Screen, the blend mode from Screen, and turn it to None. And that actually just makes the white circle disappear, but it still uses that for the generator. I usually take the low temperature all the way down so you get a little bit more of this kind of volumetric flare here. So that's just, real simple, and that's fine. But what we're going to do, as you saw in the video, is use an actual image to generate the fire. And what I did is I went on to DeviantArt, and if you check magic circles, if you do a Google search for magic circles, and go to DeviantArt or a number of other places, if you just use image search, you can find some really cool designs. There's a lot of history behind magic circles, a lot of it that I don't know, so I'm not going to try to explain it here. But one thing that I would ask you do is check to make sure that the assets you are looking at are available for use by Creative Commons, just so that you're not infringing on anybody's rights. What we're going to do here is, if we make a new composite shot, I have this some footage I recorded with my buddy Joe. It was kind of interesting because he had really no idea what the end result was going to look like, and it's always kind of interesting when you're trying a visual effect and whoever's on camera kind of has to trust you that it is going to look cool in the end. I was shooting this on a Canon T3i with, I believe it was either the Marvel's Advanced or the Canon Technicolor, the Technicolor Cinestyle picture style, so it looks a little washed out. So let's see here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the levels histogram. And I'm just going to use that just to darken, just to do some preliminary correction, just to kind of add some contrast. And then I can also use the color correction wheels to fine tune some of that. Like, I want to bring a little bit more light into the darks and take the midtones down a little bit. And the reason for this is just because when you have something that's generating light like fire, you're going to need to have some darker areas behind it so you can see the form and shape of it. So with that, usually in something like this, since I know that his hand is moving and that's where the fire is being projected from, I am going to go ahead and track his hand. And I'll actually skip ahead until this is done so that you guys aren't having your time wasted watching a track. All right, so I have this hand tracked. It's actually not this full comp. The first one was a test, so I'm actually going to go ahead and go back to where it started. So about here. And I'm just going to trim this. Take this tracker, and I'm going to make a new point that I will call hand track. And then I'm just going to apply the transform data to the hand track, and we're back here. Now, as the hand track actually starts at this, probably about 9 seconds in, I'm going to trim the data, the layer for the tracker, just to make sure that the two are still in sync. And it's probably best to go ahead and do this, you know, trimming before you start. But for right now, it's working out fine. So we've got our hand data, our track data, and we've got our source footage, which is great. And the hand track is going to be used in a number of ways. But first, let's go ahead and we're going to add the image that I got. Let's see here. This one here, as you can see. Now, this is not ideal for our purposes. So I'm going to make a composite shot of it. And the reason it's not ideal is that what I want to be generating the flames is this black area here, not the rest of this. So I'm just going to use a couple of plugins, or I'm sorry, filters, just to get this where we want it. First, I am going to use tint, just because I want to take all of the color information out of here. So with tint, I'm going to just move this all the way to 100%. I'm going to use invert just to change it to black to white. You can also already see this is kind of to come out a little bit better. And then I'm going to use levels histogram again. And this is just to start to cut away at some of the darker areas. Oh, going the wrong way. Now you're going to see some artifacts where it's not completely black and white, and that's fine. There's a threshold as to, you know, what's going to be generating the fire. So for right now, this is good. Now, what I want this to do is I want it to start here, and then the sigil, for lack of a better word, the magic circle, is going to expand out. So in this composition here, I'm going to make a circular mask. And I'm just going to animate that. So we're going to start with the mask here. We're going to set our path. Also, you can mess with this with extension, or expansion rather, to help that, but for some reason it only goes in 200 pixels, and you can see it doesn't fully go in there. So I'm going to keep this at 0. And with the keyframe set for the path, I'm going to start it out, you know, really small. Go ahead, probably 3 seconds. And then we're going to just make it larger. And what we're also going to do is take this and feather it a bit. Not too much, but just so there's a little bit of gradation there. And that just helps the effect a little better. Just because I want this to be smooth, I'm going to set the interpolation on these keyframes. Oh, guess I can't for the path. That's fine. Whatever. So right now it's you know, appearing pretty much from the center and revealing this. So let's go ahead. This is 17. I'm going to change this to circle reveal. and go back to this one, 16, which I'm going to say is clean plate. Actually, let's not call it clean plate because it won't end up being clean plate. So let's go back here and change this to main comp. All right, so if we go back and find the circle reveal and throw it on top of the layer, now what you're going to see here is we're going to be positioning this, but the effect is going to be applied in a different comp, and this will make sense in a little bit. If you're doing this with Mocha Hitfilm, if you're doing some 3D tracking, then you would do this a little bit differently. But for this, I'm going to change the blend to add just so I can see what I'm doing. And this is okay for now. Normally what you would do is you could probably skew this or something to that effect to give it a more three-dimensional feel. You can go over here, make it a 3D plane, and then use the transform properties to align it a little better, which is actually, let's do that. Then we are going to take this and parent it to the hand track so that as the hand moves, the 3D card that has the design on it is following the hand. Now the issue with this, as far as fire is concerned, is if we are to apply the fire layer to this right here, well actually I'll show you, you can see what happens. See how it's actually applying it to that layer, which the card ends right here. So no matter what we do, it's not gonna go past that, which is not what we want. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna take that and I'm going to make this another composite shot. I'm gonna move everything with the layer, hit convert. And you've got the composite shot right there. I'm actually going to change the properties of it here. The width will say 1080 and the height 19. Actually, I'm sorry, that's backwards. 1920 and 1080. Going back to our main comp, you can see that if we select the this circle reveal, now it goes all the way to the top. Unfortunately, it did change the blending mode, but let's put the fire back on here just to see how that looks now. So now it's going past the confines of the actual layer, which is good. That's what we want. Turning that off real quick, we are going to go ahead and change this to add again. And when we turn on our fire, right now it's just using the full comp here, not the full comp, but the full comp, this one, and there was this black circle around here, and that was from the mask before. So let's go back. I'm going to change the, first we're going to change the flammable region to the lightness, not the alpha. And then you can already see it's starting to take it from the shape here. I'm going to just mess around with this and get it to look like what I want it to look like eventually. So you can see it's going to come up here, and you know, you can play with this however you like, just because, you know, every single version of this is going to look a little different. I usually like to have, you know, a low scale just to, you know, and add some variation, just to kind of make it look a little bit more exciting. But right now it still has that big white design here, which isn't really what we're going for. So what I'm going to do is make that add, make it a little bit more vibrant. I'm actually going to take this again and I'm going to pre-composite it. Well, actually, before we do that, let's just take a real quick look at, you know, scrubbing through here a little bit. You could see that the fire is following the actual, you know, contours of the design. Like you can see, like right here, it's taking just that area, and that's what we want. We're going to composite this again. And here, you know, we've got the fire the way we want it, and that's great. Now here's a little trick. What I'm going to do is, just because I don't have nearly enough RAM, I'm going to turn off the fire for a second, and I'm going to duplicate the layer. the top layer, it still has the fire applied. Instead, I'm going to change this to darken. And I'm going to change the, actually no, the layer mode is good. The bottom one, I'm going to turn the effect back on. But for both of these, I'm going to go to the appearance and change this to none, the blend mode for the actual fire. And what that does is that kind of hides the it hides the white design here. So here you can see it a little better. The design is gone, but it still has the it's using that to generate it. Now on the top one, we still want this to be, you know, it's white right now. And the reason why I'm keeping one of these on is the you can't really see the shape when it's just the fire. So I'm just going to use a copy of it and do some stuff to it to kind of make it blend in, but you'll have, you know, you'll see a bit of the design still. So let's see what I'm going to do. Turn the fire on. And it's starting to blend in. That's good. I'm going to tint the fire, or I'm going to tint the layer rather. And I'm actually going to use the color from the fire itself. And I'm going to use a blur. And I'm actually going to change the blur to probably 2 pixels. And there's one more thing I'm forgetting. The way you do this, I actually had to go back and look at it a little bit. On the top layer, which we should probably name, so we'll say circle outline, and then this is circle fire. The top layer, you're going to add the tint, the fire you're already going to get, and the blur. And the important thing is the tint you're going to grab from the fire layer below, the color from that. Set your blend mode to screen. For the fire and appearance, you're going to set that to darken, and then blur, I actually upped it a little bit to 5. And that's fine, and that's just so you can get a little bit more definition here. You're going to have the fire above this stuff, above the actual, well, technically not above, but the fire will appear above a kind of, you know, a little bit blurred and little tinted version of that particular pattern that you found. Going back to our main comp. Okay, so here you have that fire that we just got from the composite shot. And what I'm doing, make sure the layer is parented to the hand track, just so that when the hand moves, the layer moves with it. You can do some fine tuning if you like. Now to make this pop a little bit more, you could use a glow filter, you could use levels histogram, but I prefer to use the gleam filter. And as you can see here, it really kind of adds that kind of magical flare to it. It's a lot like the light flares. It's got some differences though in how the rays are generated. Also make sure to have your position set to the hand track for the gleam, so that it's always kind of using this center point as the center, or it's always using the hand as the center for this tutorial. So that's looking pretty cool right there, but at the same time, something you have to consider when you're making a visual effect that has to do with light, light being, you know, generated from some point in space, is how it's going to affect the areas around it. So I'm actually going to turn off the fire effect right now, and I'm going to add a flare that's going to be situated on this center point. So we're going to make a new black plane called flare. It has to be reasonably subtle. You don't want a big lens flare with rays and things like that. Because that's going to kind of conflict with the fire, and it's going to start getting messy, and you're not going to be able to see the actual design. So I'm going to change this to my sun glare, and the hotspot position is going to be that hand track, and zero it out. And change your layer to add, so you can see that. Now the fire has kind of an orangey reddish look to it, so we're going to go ahead and you can actually turn the fire layer back on just so that you can grab the color from it. So I'm just going to use the color picker here, and I'm going to say probably around here, that kind of orange. And then just, you know, pump up the intensity and the scale just so it kind of, you can kind of see the flare in there. Change the blend mode to add. I'm actually going to turn the fire off while this happens. Scale it up a bit. You don't want it too much because if you don't see some of the, you know, background detail in the hand, it kind of kills the effect. But again, you can do whatever you like with this. So just to turn this back on, just to take a look at where we are right now, you know, it's starting to look pretty cool. And you can do some color correction afterwards just to kind of keep some of the detail in there as well. I can already see that the intensity here is probably a bit too much, so let's go to 1.07, which is just half of the 2.15 we had. And that should bring some of it back in while still kind of giving some orange kind of hue there. Kind of a halo effect. Actually 1.7, let's say 1.8. It's a little bit closer to where we were beginning, and that's a little better. So the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to turn the fire off again, and then I'm going to make a particle system that's going to be generated from here as well. That's going to grow with the flame. So let's see here. Actually, before we do that, let's have the flare actually grow as well. So if it starts around, if we turn the fire layer back on, it starts to grow, and you can time this however you like, but it starts to grow around here. So I'm going to take the flare and keyframe the intensity at 0 here, just remembering that it's going to be 1.8. And a few frames in, I'm going to pump it up past 1.8 to probably, say 2.5. It just gets really bright, and then it's going to come down as time goes on back to 1.8. What's important here, though, is that knowing where it starts at this frame here, that's going to be where our particle system starts as well. So I'm going to turn off my flare and my fire, and I'm going to add a particle system. And I'm actually going to add the particle simulator under the fire. And you can, you know, do this however you like. The way I like to do it is I'm going to make a sphere with an exploding trajectory. Make sure I'm going to keyframe the active so that it's off on this frame. Actually, it's on this frame, and the frame before it, it's off. Let's see here. We're going to raise the particles per second. It's about good, and I'm doing this really rough. You're going to want to take more time and you know, fine-tune this yourself. If you go to the regular movement, turn your scale down to 0, and then in the movement variation, turn your scale up, you can get a good kind of mixture of different types of particles there. I'm going to take the life, say like 1.8. Speed is fine, and then fine-tune this however you like. I'm going to attach the layer to the hand track, just so it kind of follows the hand as it's going. I'm also going to add a force to this, a turbulent force. as well as an attraction force, just to kind of keep it within the sphere. And just so you can see what that looks like, we're going to turn off our source layer and just take a look at this. So what it's doing is it's basically just, adding this kind of these particles that are going to be around the area. You can mess with the size and speed and things like that. One thing I like to do with particle systems is if you go to your properties and advanced, change your shutter angle. I'm going to say 360. Actually, we'll say, I don't know, 480. And then 180 here. Actually, let's change this back to 360. And then 40 samples, and the reason for that is it makes the motion blur just look a little bit cooler. We're going to try and take the same color from the fire and the flare as well. I am just going to eyeball it here. And you can go and use a certain texture source for this. I find that the default texture source works fine here, or even if you use the spark stars, works pretty well. Our color is just kind of orangey golden, a little closer to red color, and then make sure that the layer is set to add, or I'm sorry, the right here, the blend mode is set to add. And then turn our other layers back on, just to kind of get a look, see what this looks like. And it just adds a little bit more texture here. We can actually increase the speed a bit, just to have it come out a bit from this area. So let's say 50%. I'm sorry, that's scale. Speed 200, we'll say 400. Maybe take the attraction force and take it down to probably 10%. Just to kind of get these embers out there. Also, so we've got it, looking the way we want, but it's not growing the way we want. It's active. Actually, that works out fine with it. Starting here and doing that. And that's basically it. When you're done with this, you can render it out. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments. And feel free to like and subscribe this video if you'd like to see more of them, and let me know, if you've done one of these yourself, please send it my way. I'd love to see it, and let me know how you guys do. Thanks a lot. Again, my name is Phil Wesson, and this is a tutorial for Hitfilm 2 Ultimate. Thanks, guys.